Alright everyone, I want to thank you all so much for watching this video here along Interstate 5 as we pass through Sacramento, California. So I-5 is the main north-south freeway through greater Sacramento, and it almost feels like you just pass through Sacramento very quickly here along I-5. Because if you guys didn't already know, the Sacramento metropolitan area is actually oriented more east-west than it is north to south. And then of course you have that big gap in the Sacramento metropolitan area between like Davis and Woodland, and then of course the western part of Sacramento there on West Sacramento on the other side of the Sacramento River because of the Yolo bypass. So there's really two halves to Sacramento. Of course you have the main area right here on the east side of the river, and then you have that separated area out there in the west where Davis and Woodland are. So that makes the Sacramento metropolitan area certainly one of the most unique geographical metropolitan areas here in the United States, and certainly California. So as you guys know, Sacramento was founded during the California Gold Rush, and then of course it was settled right there along where the American and Sacramento rivers meet right there. That's where the downtown area of Sacramento is. And I didn't really mention this at all in the video, but in the early days of Sacramento, Sacramento used to flood a lot. In fact, the 1862 flood of Sacramento was one of the deadliest floods in United States history. And it wasn't until the early 20th century that the rivers began to get more controlled. They started building dams and started building the Yolo bypass that lies west of Sacramento to divert water away from the Sacramento River so that the city of Sacramento would not flood as much during the snowmelt season. And then of course during heavy rain downpours as well. Of course, in modern day you still get a little bit of flooding there in the boat section of I-5 in downtown Sacramento because it just can't really control that much water, of course, when it starts raining a lot, and then they have to pump it out back into the river because that section there through downtown Sacramento is actually below the river level, believe it or not, right there in the boat section. So yeah, just a little bit of trivia there that I didn't incorporate as part of the original video, but I thought it was worth mentioning here as we talk about just the drive and then the overall experience of driving through Sacramento here on I-5. And honestly, I've been wanting to film this for quite a while, but they've just been doing some construction and then some pavement rehabilitation work the last few years here in Sacramento. And honestly, I-5 is such a nice drive now through Sacramento. You just breeze right on through. And there's just so much construction going on right now in other areas of Sacramento on its freeways. They're doing a big rehabilitation project on US 50 there through downtown Sacramento. Then they're also expanding I-80 on the west side of Sacramento there as it goes across the Yolo bypass out towards the city of Davis. So eventually, once those construction projects wrap up, I'm sure I'll be filming more freeways around Sacramento. But for now, this is the only one that I will have available for you guys. So if you guys are wanting to see more of Sacramento, you're just going to have to wait just a little bit longer for these construction projects to wrap up, and then I'll be back here eventually to film more freeways for you guys to. So I know California kind of gets a bad reputation of being really expensive and then being overpriced. Well, here's the thing. Sacramento is probably the most affordable major city to live in Sacramento, and that's actually been one of the main reasons why Sacramento has continued to grow while a lot of California has been declining in population. So this area, of course, is one of the more affordable areas to live in California. In fact, the Central Valley has some of the cheapest real estate in the entire state of California, hence why a lot of people are moving here. And a lot of people are, of course, moving to Sacramento just because of its geographic location, being about an hour away from the Bay Area, traffic depending, of course. And then, of course, Sacramento is just in such a great geographic area. It literally takes the same amount of time to drive to the ocean from Sacramento as it does to drive to the mountains. And then, of course, Reno is about 2 hours away from Sacramento. Again, traffic depending, of course. And then there's just so much to do within a couple hours drive from Sacramento. And of course, Sacramento has its own unique sites as well. I mean, Old Town Sacramento is definitely one of the most underrated places to visit here in Sacramento as well. It definitely goes back in time and makes you feel like you're living back in time, what it was like when Sacramento was initially founded, of course, during the Gold Rush age, of course. And then Sacramento has a lot more to offer than you would probably think for a city of its size. Probably the only major downside to Sacramento is that it just gets really hot in the summertime, and its weather is just pretty unbearable, especially during June, July, and August during the peak summer season, where temperatures are regularly over 100 degrees, and it just gets really hot, and you just really don't want to be outside too much. But of course, the city does offer quite a bit for people to do outside during the summer as well. And then a lot of people like to go swimming in the nearby rivers that Sacramento is so famous for. In fact, they don't call Sacramento the River City for nothing. And another thing I'll say about Sacramento too is that I-5 is probably the most interesting freeway in Sacramento, because it really is the only freeway that you can get a good view of the Sacramento skyline, especially if you're heading south from the Sacramento airport there. As you approach the downtown area, you get a really nice panoramic view of the Sacramento skyline along I-5 South, and then of course you get a pretty good view of it on I-5 North here as well. And then you really don't see the Sacramento skyline at all if you're traveling through the metro area on I-80, and then you get a very brief view of it if you're traveling along US 50. But yeah, I-5 is by far and away the best drive in Sacramento as far as freeways go, in my personal opinion, because Sacramento's freeways are really not all that interesting. It doesn't have very cool interchanges like some other areas of California do. I mean, I would even argue that Fresno has more interesting freeways than Sacramento does, but I-5 is probably the sole exception here. But like I said, Sacramento doesn't have the greatest freeway designs in my personal opinion as far as like California freeways go, and it definitely has a lot to be desired when it comes to freeways looking very aesthetically pleasing, with the one exception of course being that boat section there. They did some really nice artwork that I really appreciate there as you pass through downtown Sacramento. But other than that, Sacramento freeways are not all that special in terms of like things to see, in my personal opinion. And then of course, as you cross the Sacramento River here and you head onto the Yellow Bypass, you just get really awesome views here on the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Bridge as you cross the Sacramento River. And it just really goes to show just how flat this area of California really is. Of course, we're right in the heart of the Central Valley, which is one of the largest valleys here in the United States. It's about 500 miles long, and it just cuts right through the center of the state, and Sacramento just happens to be near the northern half of the valley, slightly farther than the midpoint, but it's still right in the middle of California's big agricultural production area. In fact, they even call Sacramento California's farm to fork capital for a reason. Alright everyone, I just want to give a shout out to all my social media accounts that you see on the screen here, because I really am trying to grow my social media accounts beyond just here on YouTube. I would really appreciate it if you guys would check out my Instagram. I'm really trying to grow that social media platform, so I would really appreciate it if you guys would follow me on there. My username is just InterstateKyle. What's really cool about my Instagram is if I'm on a road trip, I will post on my story of where I am and what I'm doing, so it's just a really cool way for you guys to follow along with me in real time to see what I'm doing and what I'm up to. I know my videos on here can get pretty dated very quickly, so if you guys want to see what I'm doing in real time, I highly recommend checking out my Instagram, and I would really appreciate your support over there. You guys can also check out my Facebook group and my Twitter/X account. The links to all those are down in the description. Another thing I want to give a shout out to is my Patreon, which is a way for you guys to support me beyond YouTube here. If you guys want to join my Patreon, you guys can get special perks for joining, like watching all of my videos early before they are released here on YouTube. And all the money I make on there goes right back into this YouTube channel to keep producing more of these types of videos in the future. The link to my Patreon is also down in the description, so if you really want to check it out, I would really appreciate your extra support over there as well. And another thing that is set up on my channel is Super Thanks, which is located to the right of where you would normally like one of my videos. What that basically is just a way for you guys to tip me out for each video going forward if you feel that I've earned it, of course. And then all the money on there also goes right back to this channel to keep producing more of these types of videos in the future. And with all that said, folks, I really hope you all enjoyed watching this video here along Interstate 5 as we pass through Greater Sacramento. I want to thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all have an amazing day, and take care, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned to the next adventure, and we will see you next time.